to Gather Around Local Food, a week of online events where we've been hearing about how we can demonstrate rural community resilience by localizing our food, and also shape a green recovery after the devastating impacts of COVID, which are still ongoing, of course, by supporting our local farmers, food makers and craftspeople. I'm Stuart Kaczynski from Forth Environment Link, and if you like today's session, please follow our social media for news of more events from Forth Environment Link's Climate Action Network. Before I introduce our keynote speaker today, I need to remind you that this session is being recorded, and you can catch up with it again on our YouTube channel in a couple of weeks when it's on there. And please direct other people, if you think they'll find it interesting as well, to view that as well. So today we are absolutely delighted to welcome Jack Crotty, who co-founded NeighbourFood a little over 2 years ago today from his hometown of Cork in Ireland. I think some of you know Jack. You'll know Jack is passionate about good food. He trained as a chef at Darina Allen's famous Ballymaloe Cookery School. He then opened his street food business, The Rocket Man, in 2012 to serve healthier salads and lunches, which continue to sell at Cork's farmers markets as well as from 2 delis in Cork. Jack has cooked at raves, he's fed people at mountains, and for the past few years he has split his time between Cork and northern Italy, where he and his young family have been locked down for much of the summer. So thank you for joining us in a different time zone as well, Jack. Jack and his business partner Martin Poucher started to conceive, I believe I'm right in saying, to conceive NeighbourFood in late 2017. So I'm going to hand over to Jack now, and thank you so much for joining us, Jack. I know you're very busy. I really appreciate it. And if you could give us a bit of a flavour of where NeighbourFood came from, your journey into it, and where we've been, and perhaps where we're going, that would be absolutely fantastic.
Sure, and thank you, Stuart and Steffi and everybody else in Forth Environment Link for doing this week of chats as well, because it's been really amazing to actually be able to check in and see some of the faces of some of the people that I've been speaking with on the phone. I have this kind of group of friends now. The numbers in my phone have basically doubled in the last 2 years, and I have all these different people that I have these really long chats with that I have absolutely no idea what they look like or where they're from. So it's great to be able to see the faces and be able to touch base with everybody. We're really busy at the moment. Naturally, we had a huge growth during the coronavirus period. We reached a whole new audience of producers, customers, and hosts. And now we're kind of trying to figure out exactly what our best steps are and where we should be going with this, and how do we best give all of the communities that have formed underneath our umbrella, how do we give them the tools to be able to do more about food, within food, and ultimately sell more of these local producers and craftspeople's products. So to start, I suppose I'll explain a little bit about how I ended up sitting here and being in the position that I'm in with NeighbourFood. So I discovered a concept that was somewhat similar to this in Italy, where I'm living pretty much full-time, especially with COVID full-time now. My partner is from here, in Italian, and I have 2 daughters and they're in school here. So this is where we're based. And I discovered it over here and I thought the concept really was fantastic. So I decided I would bring it back to Ireland, because I had my food business there, and I thought this is the perfect halfway step to be able to do more than just doing a farmer's market and but not have to start going into something like a supermarket or much more distribution, another way to sell direct. So when I tried to set it up there in Ireland, the company who were providing this software were not interested in coming to Ireland. So after doing a little bit of research, we decided let's make our own Irish version. I was very lucky enough to find Martin, my business partner, the other half of NeighbourFood, who's an incredible developer, and we started putting together. And of course, as with anything, as we started digging into what's involved in a software like NeighbourFood, we realized, well, what about if you did this? And perhaps you could add this function. And all of a sudden, we were kind of going on our own train, so to speak. That was about the time that we bumped into you, Stuart, who was hosting a similar type of service in Scotland, and all of a sudden it was announced that they were pulling out of the UK and that they were leaving everybody behind. Some markets that they felt weren't sustainable, but quite a few that had done a great job of building up something. So we had an amazing opportunity to be able to speak to Stuart, explain where we were coming from, and build up these connections and start working with hosts in Scotland and the UK. So for a fledgling small company, when you look at our map, it seems like we're a giant, but in reality, we were just very lucky, and also you know, worked hard to be able to catch some of those successful markets in the UK and predominantly Scotland, to be able to continue the work that they were doing. And that was our first step, really. So that was 2 years ago this month. And since then, we have established how we operate, and we've expanded in Ireland and a small bit in the UK as well, and kind of perfected how we communicate and how we engage with customers, and trialed different bits and pieces to try and get people to buy more food, to make it easier for producers, and to kind of streamline the way that we do things. So that was how we were doing it, and everything was growing, albeit not necessarily, you know, at the speed of light, but it was growing, and we were having very positive results. And that was when we landed in this pandemic situation. So that kind of changed the game a little bit. We had a lot of producers who were half engaged with NeighbourFood, many who were not engaged at all, who suddenly realized that this could be an opportunity to do contact-free shopping, which is basically what we do. And thus the kind of 3 months of no sleep and a baby for me happened. And now we're out the tail end of that. And what we're working on now, I suppose, is really trying to think both inside the box in perfecting the smaller problems that we might have, speeding up things like verification, speeding up communications, engaging with our existing customers, engaging with customers who may have been with us for a period and are no longer with us, but also trying to look at a bigger picture and say, well, what can NeighbourFood be to food communities? Are we just a retailer, or can we be more? So now we're really starting to consider other aspects. So once social distancing is kind of starting to become a little bit more relaxed, and when people are being encouraged more to be able to travel again, we would love to start engaging with events, and we would love to start moving towards offering the users on NeighbourFood, hosts and producers, other tools within the portal that'll make their job easier. So integrating with their accounting systems, offering them independent shops separate to NeighbourFood, so that they can sell direct to their customers, and try and come in and make all of those services cheaper than they are with other providers, because we would be a database basically central that focuses with solely small producers and craft people, and be able to facilitate them having an entrance to e-commerce and simplifying it for them and having it all under one roof. That would be our dream and vision for NeighbourFood. Do you want to give me another question?
That's absolutely fantastic. Yeah. So let me just. So I have jotted some things down, but I should have said earlier, and I'm sorry that I didn't. But the floor is open. So if you want to jump in with a question or raise your hand and ask a question at any time, please do. Or if you want to just jot something in the chat that we can catch up on and touch on a little bit later, that's fine as well. So any questions or comments, please keep them coming when you can. So I guess one of my first questions, Jack, is the guys may or may not know that you had I'm going to call it a successful business, I don't know, but I'm going to assume it's a successful business running in Cork, the Rocket Man, and that was putting your own twist on really good, nourishing, wholesome Irish food in a modern way, in an exciting way, and getting kind of good food out there to the masses for healthier lunches and the like. So having already done that, what made you kind of what was lacking there that you wanted to take a next step and do something a little bit more and a little bit different again?
Just to confirm, do you mean what was the next step to go from the Rocket Man to NeighbourFood, or what was my inspiration to start the Rocket Man?
Well, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about the inspiration to start Rocket Man in the first instance, and then what led you from one business to the next, and perhaps how they work well together.
Well, briefly, the Rocket Man was quite a straightforward thing to explain in reality, which was I finished college with an English and psychology degree with very little interest in it, and certainly a little bit of itchy feet, let's say, for a desk position that I'd done for 3 or 4 years in college, and thought, right now I'm the person who works on my feet and with my hands. So that's what brought me down to Ballymaloe to do the course. Within weeks even in the weeks finishing the course, I had started actually creating Rocket Man, and I had burned every penny I had in between college and my time at Ballymaloe. So it really was a case of, I'd love to have a shop, I'd love to have a restaurant or some kind of food business, but I can't do it. So I'll go to the farmers markets, where I just have to have a table. I might have had, 300 euros to start with. I bought 300 euros worth of things and food. I went to the market, I made 600 euros. I came home, I bought 600 euros worth of things of food, and I went, and it really was genuinely as honest and as kind of building as that. I never took a loan, I never got an overdraft. We just went 1 week to the next, let's do 2 markets, let's do this. And the whole time I was also working as a chef in a restaurant as well, running a kitchen there. So I would go, early, pack car, farmer's market, come home, leave car full, go into chef. My mum then started working with me. So she would empty the car, start prepping the things for the following day. I'd come home, I'd cook all day, I'd go into chef. And then I was doing like I look at photographs and I was a skeleton at the time. I think it wasn't a very healthy period of my life, but we definitely got there and did it. And it was an exciting time because it was post recession, because I came out of college in 2007, 2008, and it was right at the time of the economic crash of the housing property issues. So there really was a sense of depression or economic instability, and these are the perfect times for people to strip away all the waste, to strip away all the unnecessary aspects of their life, and consider what's basic and what's important. And what is basic and important is eating well and treating yourself properly in terms of the quality of the food that you eat. So that like, the more we moved in and out of a recession, the more Rocket Man felt a little bit silly to me. It really was a recession-based business, and I find it interesting that now, I don't want to say we're going into a recession, but we're in an economically uncertain time. And as we've seen before, people turn back to food, people look to the farmers, and people look at policy and they say it needs to change and they need to support smaller communities. So I find it to be quite appropriate in that way. My reason then for wanting to swap from Rocket Man to NeighbourFood was really more of a want to be a host than to actually own the software that did it. That was just a necessity that came about. But I had been at farmers markets for, at this point, probably 9 years. We still trade. My mum does it now full time. And I watched as farmers, primary producers, let's call them, which are growers and farmers of animals and meat and husbandry and different cheese makers and things, making the actual things themselves, were in decline at the farmers markets, yet the number of people attending the markets was going up. So you had more stalls coming, selling food to go, coffee, things like this, but the actual growers and makers and primary producers were not doing the great business that they did. And you would see a farmer who would do well in the morning, and at 11:30, the market's open till 3. At 11:30, he basically says his business is finished for the day, but he can't leave. He has to stay around while everybody hangs around having lunch. So this idea of how NeighbourFood could operate, that you could have a drop off, not spend your whole day selling, and more in line start spending your day doing what you actually love, which is being a farmer. No one became a farmer to stand at a market stall. Some people enjoy it, and it is an incredibly important part of life. And we will always do anything we can to support farmers markets, because I think that they are an essential part of this whole puzzle. NeighbourFood was designed as being, you can actually be selling things while you're not standing at a stall and just be dropping it off. So that's what really appealed to me about NeighbourFood. And the really gorgeous thing that has happened is that we have found people who didn't shop at farmers markets who are now using NeighbourFood to buy primary. And everyone here who's a host will be able to agree with me in that people aren't buying very many ready-made meals or different kind of created things, that they're really buying vegetables, they're really buying milk, they're buying bread, they're buying eggs. It's people who are cooking and using that food. And I just think that that's exactly the point of what we wanted to do. And we haven't just tapped into an existing group of people and convinced them to use our software. We've actually created a place where people can buy really good quality raw ingredients. So it's inspired them to cook a little bit more. And that's certainly what I feel is the nicest thing about what we do, is the thing that makes it easy if you're working really hard and answering loads of questions, to see all that veg being sold, basically. Next question.
So I think we've got a question in the chat here. I'm just going to read it out. So Jack, have you seen any growing engagement between producers and businesses via the platform? Is this an area of development? By businesses, meaning cafes, restaurants, and retail?
Yeah, so I suppose business to business, B2B, is NeighbourFood capable of being a B2B service? We have a farm that we work with in Ireland who are a young couple in their early 30s or maybe even late 20s who have taken on a farm and are growing a fantastic range of different things. And they see their business as two-pronged. They see farmers markets and restaurants. And to them, that's the full picture of how they imagine their business to be. They had to swap over to NeighbourFood, and now they really see it as NeighbourFood and restaurants. They're not people who want to do 5 markets a week, so they have one farmers market that they do, and then they supply 3 or 4 or 5 NeighbourFoods, I can't quite remember now, and then they receive calls from restaurants and different food businesses. They take it down in a little book, they put it together, they drop it to the restaurant, they have to send an invoice to the restaurant at the end of the month. And they have actually come to us and said, we'll build it with you, we'll tell you exactly what it needs. It would be great if there was a way for the portal to be able to do a business to business application, so producers could set different volumes and different prices, because you're not selling to individuals anymore, you're selling, wholesale basically. And can we build up the network in that way? We have all the producers on our database, so why not be able to let them use that to supply the restaurants as well? And it's definitely something that we have on our list, something we to get into next.
Fantastic, thank you. Any other questions from the group? Okay, well, I'm going to come in with another question then. I'm going to take us a little bit more abstract for a moment or two. So food is something that we all have in common, of course. I think you said that earlier, and even more important in terms of a crisis, that we do look after ourselves and have nourishing food. But it's much more than nutrition. It informs our sense of identity, our sense of ourself. It's intricately linked with place. It creates jobs. It's in many ways directs how society works. There's a huge amount of inequity where food is concerned. There are bad diets creating health crises. There's damaging intensive agriculture driving climate change. And yet good food shared with others has such a profound positive effect on our mental health and well-being. So my question is, how does NeighbourFood tread the minefield that is food? It's deeply personal and has so many different views around it. What messages does NeighbourFood, if any, seek to communicate?
That's definitely something that we ponder quite a lot, and we trial the idea of a message, whether it's in a Facebook post or whether it's in something a little bit more internal with our users and members. And you're completely right, is that it is integral in any small community, but there's a global picture as well of food. And we all know that if there's a problem that needs to be solved, talking about the problem rarely solves the problem, but a solution, in fact, is much easier to engage with. So there are so many different problems with food systems, the approaches that groups and governments and of course big business take in food, because it's one of our primary needs in life. So we're all, no matter who you are and what you do and what type of person you are, you eat 3-4 times a day. Some people eat twice a day, and where you choose to do that defines who you are as a person and how you do it. For me, I always felt that NeighbourFood needed to be a representation of everybody who uses it, and there are very different types of producers. There are some that couldn't be more passionate about one aspect, whether it be, let's just take climate change as an example. And then there's another producer who doesn't bother themselves with that big problem, because that's something that's way too big for them to manage, but they really consider something like health and personal health. So for us to have uniform messages that we send is quite difficult because we all come from different places. So I think for me, economy is a big part of how we view what we do. So buying directly from a person in your community benefits several different things. Whatever about the product that you're buying and how it affects your health or the environment or the change around you, these little circular economies promote and build jobs in communities. And I had quite I remember I was very young. When I started Rocketman, I was 22, and I was one of the only young people in Cork City that was kind of caring and doing something. So I got pulled into all these different focus groups and different efforts that the council were making to try and do things. And I remember being at one, and it was called like the Cork City strategy meeting or something like this. And there was about 12 business people there, and everybody was really passionate and very, very capable, you know, entrepreneurs. And there was one woman who was chairing it, and she's so, I'm so fond of her. She's so impressive. And at the time, Starbucks were taking their first unit in the center of Cork, and people were giving their usual, you know, this is an outrage, we don't need them, whatever. And she stood up and she made a very powerful speech about how we need to consider jobs, we need to consider, you know, globalizing and all these types of things. And at the time, I wouldn't have had the confidence to say it, but Starbucks systemizes the way in which they sell coffee so much that they can produce more coffees per person working in their shop than any other company. They outsource all of their equipment and all of their sourcing to America or other places. Very rarely do they source anything in Ireland. That eliminates jobs. Like 4 small independent cafes with 2 people working in each of them, a team of 8. You know, that's the volume that one person in Starbucks can do because they press buttons and put out cups of coffee. So I was quite shocked by the idea of this really, really like intelligent, well spoken and very well kind of informed person saying that we need things like that for the sake of jobs. So that's kind of what it brings me back to, in the idea that like if we can support smaller producers, we can't give people thousands, we can't seem to generate enough revenue that you can just supply NeighbourFood and that's all you need. It's part of your business. But at least that money is just going from one person in the community to the other person in the community. There's a commission going to the host, and of course there's a commission going to us. But if we use our funds and resources to try and further build those communities, that is bettering the community at large, 100%. There's no doubt about it. Kind of drew your question, Stuart. I think mostly I believe that for the means to and platforms for people to have all the important conversations that they want to have, I think that's the best thing. My connection went unstable, did it?
We just lost the end, but I think we got the gist. If anybody wants Jack to repeat any of that last bit, to do let us know. Yeah, I think could you just go over the last little bit? I think.
Well, I was just saying.
You talking about conversations, maybe?
Yeah, that our main kind of message, maybe, that we wanted to try and do was to create platforms and spaces for smaller communities to have all the big decisions and all the big conversations that they want to have. So I think that's what we would like to do. It's hard for us to have global messages we send forward because there's so many different things affected. Like, I'll give you one piece of food for thought. These days, some of the most commonly suggested activities for us to do are to occupy our minds, occupy our time, and occupy our hands. Get away from your screen and do yoga, tai chi, go for big walks, go for big hikes. These are all exercises we do to try and sort out mental health. And mental health is certainly up there with all the environmental and all the quality issues that we might have. But when I go home in the evening, I always cook. Even if I'm not cooking that night because my partner said I has cooked or we're having something else, I'll generally cook something for the following day.
Oh, we might just have lost Jack's connection there. Hopefully he'll come back very soon. But absolutely right. I think there's a lot of talk about us getting away from screens, whether it's getting in the.
Did I disappear?
Sorry, You're back in the room, Jack. We just lost you for about 30 seconds there.
I have no idea what actually happened. It didn't even tell me. It just disappeared and then came back. Sorry about that.
You were saying that you cook even if it's not for that evening.
Yeah, well, yeah. I just mean that the cooking and the doing the housework, the cleaning, all of that is something that I believe that we've lost touch with, and I love that NeighbourFood is getting people making their own kefir or kombucha. We sell loads of kits. We seem to sell lots of activities on NeighbourFood as well, where people are wanting sourdough starters to be able to do sourdough. And for me, that's really positive, because that hour of making sourdough is like 10 hours of yoga, I think, personally. Was there another question?
Yeah, there's another question here. So I don't know if you can see that, but I'll read it out just so we've got it there as well. Actually, just a comment as well. Just from what you were saying, that cooking is so important for the family unit in lockdown. We're all sitting around a table for meals. When I'm in the kitchen cooking, the children come in for a chat as well as to cook. So it's that connection, isn't it? Around, you're not even quite the eating yet, and there's still that connection around family and food. So the next question is there a maximum capacity to any NeighbourFood market? Are FEL or NeighbourFood working with producers to mitigating for increased demand if, for example, the UK is impacted by tariffs and food supplies early next year? So obviously talking about Brexit there, got a big question. Any thoughts on that?
Well, there isn't a limit at all to the number of NeighbourFood collections, nor is there a limit to the number of producers supplying NeighbourFood collections. There's, of course, an equation, a magic number there, where everybody supplying is making enough money to justify them being there, and the selection is wide enough so that more customers will join. And that's our challenge as hosts and as NeighbourFood ourselves, to try and teach our hosts to say, you know, don't flood your NeighbourFood in the beginning with so many producers that they can't afford to be part of it. But at the same time, keep considering your selection and say, well, you know, if we brought on a good fish supplier here, it might bring us more customers, and we in that kind of way. So no, there's absolutely no limit on it. There's just a limit of the number of customers, really.
And I guess the other part of that question about capacity is producer capacity. Now, this is something that we saw UK-wide, certainly from what I've read during lockdown. We had a peak in demand for local food from a whole variety of different places, whether it's cafes turned into local grocery stores, the online markets, and other places stepping up to the mark to provide for their communities. But there was a capacity issue there. Some producers just didn't have enough fruit and veg, or in some cases, some of the bigger food companies and supermarkets were coming in and hijacking supplies. Sorry, hijacking is perhaps not the right word, but coming in and cutting in on some of the supplies that would normally they would ignore because they're too small for them. But because they were struggling for supplies elsewhere, they were getting those. So I think we certainly, and we heard about it in a talk yesterday. We experienced some cases where producers were just not able to meet the huge spike in demand that we saw. Is there anything that NeighbourFood can do to support with that?
I mean, we can't grow more food for you, for sure. But I do think that with a system like NeighbourFood, and the fact that you can manage stock within the platform, the fact that you can join new markets, that you can limit what's sold in certain markets, and that you can see who's buying what you're buying. And I think that in that case, using the NeighbourFood model to supply is a great way to kind of manage where things are going and how they're doing. Dealing with supply and demand is a really difficult thing. So I think really what that question is probably saying is, if I up my volume, is there anything NeighbourFood can do to help? And I suppose all we can try and do is continue to push more and more customers to the site to be able to create that demand, so that people who are wondering about filling one more polytunnel this year because last year they needed it, will they need it next year, that we can try and bring awareness to that new project that you're doing, and then try, of course, to do our best to drive customers as much as we can too. And I will say one thing about kind of bringing customers, because at the moment we're working with some people whose speciality would be kind of like targeted online advertising. And I find it terrifying when you hear about all the things that can be done. You can record who visits your site, log their IP, and then push advertising to them at some stage in the future. But the reality is, everyone we're working against here, like all the bigger multinationals, this is how they are advertising. And a small producer would never be able to do this. It's an expensive process. But NeighbourFood can do it, and we can trial it in one market and we can see the results and we can tweak it, and then we can trial it in another market, and we can keep going until we generate these great ways to get word out there. And then we can launch it in every one of our locations. So that's this month, we're trialing those now in a couple of different markets to see, is there a feedback? Are we finding new people this way? So we're really trialing all the different types of ways to try and let people hear about what we're doing and bring them in closer to what is available, I suppose.
Thank you. I think yes, supply and demand is a tricky one. I think we can probably all agree that what we need is far more market gardens, for example, far more local people growing, and perhaps if they can see those local markets, and there is UK exiting Europe around the corner, and possible disruption to imports of food, then that market might encourage more people to actually get into the business of producing food and growing food and selling it locally, and with markets available. And of course, if there isn't a market in your neighbourhood, very easy to start one, or encourage your best friend to start one for you. So yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I do not kind of hog the screen time here, so I'm going to just invite anybody to come in with any questions again before I come in with another one. Okay, so I guess you mentioned 2 years ago this month, NeighbourFood started. The first market, Cork in Ireland, am I right in saying?
No, the first market was in Wales.
Ah, there we go.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, the first market was in Wales. He was part of the gang that I was explaining at the start of these UK hosts that would have been with the food assembly who kind of had this sudden, you've got 30 days and you're done kind of thing. So we were planning to launch Cork in September, and we decided to pause it because we knew that the UK was going to be more important.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So 2 years in, what I guess what have you kind of learned? What were you trying to do 2 years ago, and what are you trying to do 2 years later? What's changed along the way for you guys?
I suppose what's changed for me is that I believed there was a customer that wanted what we were doing, and that we were going to try and get that person to use NeighbourFood on a very basic level. Now it seems to me that there's a lot of people who don't realize they want to use NeighbourFood, and with the right convincing and with the right positioning to them in their day, that we can actually change people. So instead of just offering a service that says, here's all the things you use, but here's a faster, better way to get them, it's more like, here's a load of things that you may not have used before, but you do want to. And here's lovely pictures and descriptions and authenticity that shows you that this is what you want. And once you try it, then you'll be wanting it, and you'll do it all on your own. So that's, I think, a little bit where my focus has changed a small bit in this, is that I've realized that there are people who I never thought would care about the food that they're buying are now, once a week, every week, full baskets, the whole family are eating through NeighbourFood. And that's kind of what I'm thinking now, is that we need to do our best to further convince people that there's 1,000 reasons to start buying from local producers, not just one. Yeah.
Fantastic.
There's a challenge in that, by the way.
Uh-huh.
And it's a big one for us. It's a big piece of feedback that we get, which is that it's too expensive. It's too expensive to buy from local producers. And the reality is there are many people who sell on NeighbourFood who overprice their products for different reasons. And there are many people on NeighbourFood who underprice their products for similar reasons. And the main reason that I believe it is just they don't have a team of psychologists telling them how to package and how to price their products like supermarkets do. So I put up a free range, non-organic, but free range and, you know, correctly fed chicken for 15 euros. And someone will say, I'm sorry, but 15 euros for a chicken is absolutely outrageous. In a supermarket, it's 8. I wouldn't mind paying 10, but 8 to 15 is almost double the price. And then you go down and you look at it and you say, well, that chicken's 2.8 kilos and the one in the supermarket is 1.1 kilos. So per kilo, not only is it incredibly better value, money-wise, the quality is obscenely different. The animal has lived for 80 to 90 days rather than 22 days or something like this. So the problem there is that people are just not being, in the producers themselves who are packaging and pricing their products are just, they're not considering the need for a psychologist to manipulate their customers into thinking that they have better value. So it leaves us thinking, well, then what can we do to, what, like, value is clearly something we need to talk about. Something can be great value and it's nothing to do with the price. It might be twice the price of the supermarket counterpart. But in terms of value, whether it's nutritional, whether it's environmental, whether it's volume, how much ready 3 liters of stock, these kinds of types of things. So for us, we want to make value a talking point that we're going to start talking about more. So we're introducing now into our shop. I don't know if any of you have noticed, but we've released a new shop so that we're making it easier for people to use us. So there's a new category and there's a recently purchased and there's a favorites, just to try and help people streamline their shopping. We're also including a new category, which is going to come out hopefully next week, actually, which is best value items. So as well as choosing a host selection, the host will choose best value items. So the host can share with their customers and say, you know, these guys here, this is a bag of salad leaves for €2.50. They're incredible and it's 400 grams. The one for €2.50 in a supermarket is 150 grams and it melts in your fridge within 24 hours. These last for 2 weeks and they're organic. So we're hoping that this other way that the hosts can tick these products and show the customers that these are incredibly good value. This is 2 pounds of organic yogurt in a jar for €3.50. It's almost the same price as a supermarket one, but it's actually organic and it's from Jersey cattle. So it's like fixed set yogurt. People might not be able to see that when they look through the list because the photograph of the jar is really far away and it looks kind of small. So these are things we're doing to try and help our hosts articulate value in the best way they can to the customers so that we can try and break this perception of NeighbourFood being expensive. NeighbourFood isn't expensive, it's a marketplace. It's where people sell their own products and they price them their own way. There's going to be expensive things, but there's also going to be incredibly good value things. So how do we kind of get customers to find that value?
I'm reminded of that that quote, the price of everything and the value of nothing.
Yes.
It really is about talking to people about values other than price, and it's actually I've tried it multiple times. It's actually pretty difficult to compare a typical supermarket basket with a typical basket from local produce because the manufacturing processes and the supply chain is just so different. What goes into it is different. The quality is as you say, it can be a real point of difference. Just tasting something side by side can really give you a sense of the value there. So it really isn't, the price is a really poor comparison tool in many ways because you're not comparing like with like. I think you also tapped into a comment here. It's so important to get people who grow to meet it's so important to get people to meet the buyers, to get the buyers and the growers together and to hear their stories. I think And it's like you're saying, it's how you communicate that, and perhaps some of those tools that you're talking about, some of those features on the website, will tell those stories about value, about favourites, etc., and help those producers, while they can't get together and gather with their customers via the markets, find another route for them to tell their stories and say why this is so good, and for the host to help in that process as well. So I'm going to hand over to Marion. Marion, you said you had a question.
Sorry, I kept trying to type it and it was just wouldn't work. Anyway, it was Jack. One of the so we are struggling very much in our area in the Flint Getaway. It's almost like the world walking upside down, because we have like a huge response from a lot of enthusiasm from potential customers, but the producers are just not coming on board. We have like various reasons for it, but like a lot of the time in a conversation, the 20% comes back. So whether someone believes that it's the same value as a VAT, or it's just like their markup, or it's just like too much for a host, or this and that, it always comes back around that issue of like having to give up a little. And the reason why it's a bit of an issue is because, well, some of the producers here, they offer delivery to your to your doors for free. Well, also they think it's free, that's the thing. Or the other thing as well is like they're quite happy to have customers coming to their gates. But this is not like a community spirit. It really is just about like making money, or getting by anyway. But on Monday, there was someone here on this Zoom meet that pointed out that the problem is like a lot of producers think that if they were doing that service themselves, so what NeighbourFood provide as a service, they believe that if they were doing that themselves, it will be either cheaper than 20% or even free, And, so how do you get by to answer to that? Sorry, I think you're gone anyway. It was the question, I know.
No, I'm still here. I actually heard everything. It's telling me that my connection is a little bit unstable, but I think it just comes back. Can everybody hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Super. That question. Okay, so it's a question we come up against for sure every time we deal with different groups of producers. It's not something that is brought up by producers once they're using NeighbourFood. That's one thing I will say, is that once people start using it, they quickly realize what the commissions are there for. They realize how much work the host does to rescue all of the mistakes and problems that happen each week. What's important, and what I try to articulate to people, is that you have to remember that it's not a commission for nothing. It's not that we had an idea and we charge a commission for the idea. The commission is there to represent the service. So what the service is I could list out all the things that we do, whether it's a support channel or making, ensuring payments all work or different things like this. But the reality is, look at what it takes away from the producer. Just look at the expenses that are taken away. So the wages of spending the amount of time dealing with each one of those customers, the amount of fuel and time spent delivering to each one of those different customers individually, the time spent invoicing or doing receipts for each individual person that's there, by that all being automated throughout our system, the saving, we believe, represents more than or possibly equal to 20%. So we're pretty certain, and this is a good conversation to have with Stuart present here, because when we contacted Stuart about possibly taking over with the position in Scotland that he would have been in before, Stuart was the one who said to us that this is an economic practice, and having an entity that you're working with whose job is to try and make money means that it'll grow, means that it'll improve, and means that you'll get those answers to the things you need at the time when you need them, not 3 weeks later. So there is a model similar to NeighbourFood called OFN, the Open Food Network, which is an open source software which provides the similar idea to what NeighbourFood is. But when I researched, because I just wanted to be a host, I didn't want to build NeighbourFood. When I wanted to be a host and I researched that, I thought to myself, it's beautiful in theory, but it's unfair on each producer, because for each producer, it's their business, it's their livelihood, it's an economic practice. So for me to use an open source something when problems happen, they need to be resolved. Instead of just fixing a problem, we improve it so that the problem doesn't happen again, and maybe we even get better from it, because we're incentivized to do that. We can hire people in support who can be there to answer the questions each day. We can hire designers to design better quality graphics so that we become a better company that represents and brings more customers. So there's many different ways to answer the question about the 20%, but mostly from my point of view, I think once the producers come on board and join NeighbourFood, they very quickly see where that percentages are going, because all they have to do is read an email, drop off the products. All the sales, all the financing, all the organizing, and all the conversations with each one of the customers is what the 20% is paying for.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I totally understand the fact that there's many ways to reply to this 20% question, because when I'm being told by producers, it's always a slightly different concern, but it's always around this 20%. And the delivery, that's the two things that producers, I mean, I totally so understand the benefits of NeighbourFood, but like, anyway.
There is another thing on this point as well, which is that we're dealing with a group of people who've always sold direct. So to them, the idea of 20% is like, I'm giving you 20% for this. But in reality, if they supply that product into a shop, into one shop, a small local independent shop, the margin is going to be somewhere around 20%, if not higher. And we're offering the same service, except you don't have to invoice, you don't have to wait 30 days, you know, and you don't have to receive different phone calls from different shops. You just get an automatic email with a specific time for dropping off each week. So it's the same service as supplying a shop, but in many cases, a lot of these producers, they're not supplying shops, they're just selling direct to customers.
Thanks, Jack. We have another question.
Whereas when you deal with, oh, I'm cutting off there. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'm back now. No, I'm good.
Okay. So another question. Would it be possible for hosts to be able to print off the same picking list that producers see?
Yeah.
That would make it easier to check we've received everything when producers drop their orders off. The current producers list shows items by the customer, so it takes a little bit longer to kind of sort through and find the same results.
Yeah, not only is it possible, it's also very simple. So we could do it within a couple of days. I've actually already written it down on my list here, so we'll release that sometime over the weekend.
Thank you. I hope that's good news. And we've got about 5 to 8 minutes left by my reckoning. So I'm going to jump in with another question. So we're still amid a pandemic, of course, possibly going into long predicted second wave as we go into the winter. The UK is leaving the European Union, and we face twin climate and diet related health crises. So nice easy question, Jack. How can local food save us?
in health, in personal health?
Well, I guess there's an awful lot. There's an awful lot of bigger global problems. We have a global pandemic. We have our processed food, in particular, is not good for our health. It's killing us. It's also damaging the planet, and so there's a lot going on. And how can local food systems rather than global food systems provide some of that answer?
Okay. Instead of answering all the really serious questions, I'll give you 2 different reasons, and then all the rest of the problems will solve themselves. 1, it just tastes way better, infinitely better. I'll stand up in any discussion, it'll taste better, guaranteed. And the second one is getting to know your local food producers and your local farmers. They're incredible crack. They're really wonderful people. So for those 2 reasons, we don't need to worry about the environment because it'll solve itself. We don't need to worry about mass-produced foods having really high salt levels and causing really horrible health defects within societies over a prolonged period of time. just get to know your farmers, enjoy their company, get to know your food, it tastes way better, and all the rest of the problems will fix themselves.
I absolutely agree. I think when we take agency, we take control over what we're eating, how we're eating, where it's coming from, and taking control of that process, as opposed to sitting back. I like to think of it as not being a consumer actually, but being a citizen, being a food citizen, and that has a knock-on effect. We then suddenly start to see the chain of events that comes out of our food. We can start seeing, noticing the difference when we're having something that tastes amazing, that we feel is really nourishing for us, that we feel is supporting that farmer down the road, that we feel is lessening the worst effects of food production around the world. Not all food production is bad, but a lot of the intensive work is. So I think just that simple act of connection, I'd agree with you, is a really powerful tool. The Italian way, I like that comment. Do it the Italian way. Jack, you learned Italian at lightning speed, I believe. Yeah. You obviously grew up in Ireland, and you've been good enough to visit us in Scotland, and obviously you've spoken to hosts in Ireland and Scotland a lot. What can we in Scotland learn from Italy? What can we learn from Ireland? What can they learn from us, maybe?
Well, the amazing thing about Italy is they're the producer of most of the food for the rest of the world. So there's a huge amount of intensive production happens in Italy. But the Italians still go to the delicatessen to get the sliced meats and the cheeses. They still go to the vegetable shop to get the vegetables. Everything done by small independent businesses. There's no real chains. There's some chain restaurants, and there are of course chain supermarkets, but the majority of the Italians don't use them. The veg selection in the supermarkets is actually quite small. The society here embraces the idea of having people who are specialized in certain things and going to them and enjoying the process of going to them. And I learn new things every day, and I realize different things every day. And I say, how do they maintain this? Like, how can we not keep one street in Cork City with independent retailers on it? And yet here they seem to maintain a country of 60 million people and all these different small independent businesses. And I went into my local vegetable shop yesterday, and I asked for red cabbage, and he laughed at me because he said it's not ready yet, it comes in the winter. And I kind of realized that even I, who am so obsessed with shopping locally and seasonally and everything, that I looked around the vegetable shop and I realized the selection was completely different to 2 months ago. And it actually follows seasonality. And not only that, but the customers here, the Italian people, follow seasonality, because you wouldn't eat that now if it's available. It wouldn't be nice. I mean, it would be incredible to bring people home in Ireland back to that way of thinking, that like there's no need to have, you know, these things when they're not available, because they're just not nice. You know, they're more expensive and not nice.
Absolutely, eating things in season. I think we like to say it just tastes better. Why would you not? Why would you try to have something for the sake of having it out of season? It's just not going to.
And everybody looks for inspiration for what to cook. There's no better inspiration than sticking to the seasons, because suddenly that thing you got comfortable cooking is you can't cook it anymore, and now there's a whole new round of things that you can cook. So instead of Googling best easy meals tonight, Google, what the fuck am I going to do with a carrot, or what am I going to do with a celeriac, you know? And that's an inspiration to find new things to cook with. The seasons is one of the greatest ways to balance and change your diet. And it's cheaper. It's way cheaper.
That's fantastic. We're running out of time, so I'm going to just check in with anybody if they have any questions here. I'm just getting a comment, same in Portugal, echoing your comments there about Italy, about seasonal food. Marion.
Sorry, I was in the middle of typing that question. In fact, in the end, I can't resist. I think I vaguely heard that NeighbourFood might be involved in trying to create network of market gardens, or is it just something that is very vague? I don't quite remember. Is it?
It's not something that we've ever started a project on, but it's absolutely something that we would adore to do. At the moment, we're struggling to find the time to just keep up with all the different improvements that have been requested over the last couple of months. So it's definitely not something that we can sit down and put together now. But we are discussing, and it's in Ireland, but it's learnings that can be applied in the UK. A partnership, a learning and sharing partnership, a non-financial partnership with a not-for-profit group called GIY, which are based in Ireland, called Grow It Yourself. And they host growing classes, and they also provide packs and kits to people. If you go onto their website, they'll send you everything you need, whether you have a balcony or a small farm. They'll guide you in being able to get the most out of it. So we are starting a partnership with them, and whatever way that evolves and what it does, the goal of that partnership will be, we sell locally grown vegetables. There isn't enough of them. We want more of them. These guys will teach you how to grow them. So you get growing and we'll get selling is kind of the message that we're sending with that. So if that's maybe what you're referring to, it's maybe you're reading my emails, because I don't think we've talked about it publicly, but I probably said it on the phone to you or something. But that is definitely something that we're working on. But it wouldn't be an active kind of like, we're going to take people who want to grow market gardens. We're not at that stage yet. But I know that at the bottom of everything, me being able to sit here in 5 years' time, still being the head of NeighbourFood, depends on finding growers to sell on NeighbourFood. That's all we need. If there's a great grower, everything else will sell. They'll buy cider, they'll buy butter, they'll buy everything else. But there has to be a really good grower at the center of everything. So anything we can do to stimulate the growing community.
Nice one. Mm-hmm.
This is the place to be. So hopefully that'll work. Did I fall out there again? Yeah.
Briefly, but I think again we got the gist. I think it's something that's on all of our minds, particularly given what we saw over the summer, where there was this huge wants and demand for local food. Some of it through necessity, because the supermarket shelves are emptying, but I think also there's just a long-term growing trend, COVID aside, a long-term growing trend for thinking about where our food comes from and how we can eat better for ourselves, be healthier ourselves, and have a healthier planet. So I think we're all thinking, we just need, where do we get more of this stuff? I think there are people keen to grow. They need to know how. They need space and land to do it. There's an awful lot of problems there, but I think there's a lot of talk about that, exactly that, both in the UK and sounds like Ireland as well. So that's fantastic. Mm-hmm. We're at the end of our time. Any last questions at all? Or any last comments from yourself, Jack?
No, I think I'm pretty good. Thanks everybody for listening to my ramblings.
Thank you so much for joining us. We know you guys have been working tirelessly. You and Martin both have young families as well. We know what that's like, and so really appreciate you taking some time out to speak with everyone today, be part of our week of events. And,
no, thank you.
I hope you can catch up with some of the other talks we've been doing on YouTube when you have any mythical leisure time in the future. But thank you so much again, and I'm sure I echo it from everybody in the group here. We really appreciate all the work that's going in from your side, and thank you so much for telling us and talking a little bit around it and sharing some of your passion for good food with us.
No, it's great, and stay in touch. Keep in contact with us with any types of suggestions or wishes, because at the moment we are making changes and we're evolving into ways that we can really improve. And I feel that there's little nuggets in there, something you never realized would have such a good effect, can have this incredible impact across all our markets. Maybe the pick list that the producers receive being sent to the hosts might just cut 10 minutes off every one of our hosts' day each week, so it's these little things. Some of them are complicated, but that one is very easy to implement. So please keep the requests coming.
Fantastic. Thank you so much again. And just a quick reminder that this will appear at some point, maybe in the next couple of weeks, on FVL's YouTube channel. Keep up with FVL's social media. We have this week of events, but we are planning many more similar events on all sorts of different topics related to climate action into 2021 as well. So keep up with our digital content, and hopefully we'll have some more physical gatherings at some point in the future as well. So great to see all you guys.
Come
Thank
to
you
Ireland.
so much.
Thank you.
We'd love
All
to.
right.